Chapter 14, Lecture 2 is going to kind of talk about food nutrition and how we eat too many nutrients, the bad nutrients actually, in the United States, and how unfortunately poverty around the world is a reality, which causes a lot of people not to get the proper amount of nutrients. So the reality is we have more than enough food produced to meet everyone's basic needs. The problem is it's not getting to everyone who needs it. Many of the poor have health problems. We've got something called food security, food insecurity. The World Summit of 1996 defined food security as existing when all people at all times have access to sufficient, safe, nutritious food to maintain a healthy and active life. That'd be awesome. We don't have it. In the United States alone, we have, as I said, something called malnutrition, where we don't eat the right calories. A lot of food, not always the right stuff. Food insecurity, when people live with hunger and fear starvation. So think about it. We, of course, it's not a matter of what we're going to eat. It's just, or it's not a matter, rather, of if we're going to eat. It's a matter of what we're going to eat. A lot of nations aren't like that. They don't know where their next meal is going to come from. When people oftentimes don't have enough food, the root cause generally is. So many people suffer from chronic hunger, malnutrition. We need macronutrients in order to keep our body working properly. We need micronutrients. Macronutrients are things like carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Micronutrients are things like vitamins and minerals, foods that we don't necessarily have the right stuff in it. Unfortunately, 1 in 6 people in developing countries are chronically undernourished. We have about 5.5 million people die prematurely from poverty, undernutrition, malnutrition, susceptibility to disease. That is a number to defeat. Chronic undernutrition can't grow or buy enough food. They're just simply not getting enough food in general. This leads to stunted growth, mental retardation in kids, and of course they're susceptible to disease because your immune system doesn't properly work. Chronic malnutrition is insufficient protein, particularly in other nutrients. There's 2 types. There's marasmus and kwashiorkor. Marasmus is a wasting from low calories and protein. So when you see pictures of, unfortunately, in developing countries, kids, oftentimes they just don't have the right calories, and particularly proteins. Proteins are things like meats or beans. They don't get that. Kwashiorkor is severe protein deficiency, particularly in kids ages 1 through 3. Little case study, vitamin A deficiency is a huge problem in a lot of countries. It does lead to blindness and death. In 1999, Perkrekas and Bayer actually genetically engineered rice with a beta-carotene in it and more iron. Rice is a food supply which is easy to grow. It's easy to transport. So what they did was they put this gene in it to make beta-carotene and more iron. So what happens is, and it's called golden rice, by the way, we can get those to the people who need it and ideally avoid blindness caused from a lack of that vitamin A. UNICEF, what they want, what we need to do, immunize children. We need to encourage breastfeeding among cultures because that gives a kid an early start in life, developing their immune system, and along with a lot of getting them the right vitamins and minerals. Preventing dehydration. A lot of kids around the world, we'll talk later, don't have proper water either, or clean water. Giving children vitamin A, huge relief efforts to try to do that, of course. The rice also. Family planning services and increasing education, basically empowering women. Many people, of course, in the United States have what's called overnutrition. Similar health problems to those who are underfed. Basically, we're eating a lot of food, but we're not getting the right nutrients. Lower life expectancy, greater susceptibility to disease and illness because of this, and lower productivity and quality. Famine has struck many nations like Ethiopia, usually caused by crop failures from drought, flooding, or even war. Lots of times nations will have enough food, but because of war, it does not get to the right. A couple things, genetic engineering, crossbreeding. What we can do is, with this, a lot of times the process takes half the time of traditional methods. We can grow crops a lot quicker. We can cut costs. We can allow for kinds of product development. 2/3 of the food products on the United States shelves are genetically engineered and probably rising. The problem is GMOs are not always labeled properly or at all. And we're also seeing, of course, trends across Europe where they're getting rid of their genetically modified organisms because it is causing allergies, and it may get into our original supply of things like corn. We're also seeing they're developing resistance to, or we're getting crops that develop resistance rather to things like heat and cold, herbicides, the insects, parasites, viral disease, drought, salty or acidic soil too. That's a good thing. So why not develop a crop that can actually be a little bit more drought resistant, that doesn't die? There's actually grass, as a matter of fact, I believe UW-Madison developed recently that maintains its color even though we may have drought-like conditions. So let's continue going on with the genetically modified organisms. Again, there is some right now, though. Problem is, in the United States particularly, is we eat too much meat. We're too high in the food chain. We raise, of course, animals for meat and things like pastures and feedlots. Whoa. Meat production has increased fourfold between 1961 and 2007. Demand is expected to go higher. We like our... What happens is beef actually uses way too much water. You have to grow the crops. Crops need water. You need to give cows water to drink. There's a lot of water involved in the processing of the meat then afterwards. It uses more than 1/3 of the world's grain. So if we would just eat lower on the food chain, that 1/3 of the world grain could actually go to other people who need it. Large amounts of animal waste, what do we do with it? Rushes off in the water, we get fecal coliform. Overgrazing can lead to soil erosion. That's what happened in the Dust Bowl of the 1930s, and it can compact the soil, which leads to desertification. So how do we control grazing animals? Well, we can aggregate livestock around water sources. That's where they tend to go. There's good and bad of that. By the way, water sources, anything around water is called a riparian zone. What happens is when cows, of course, they need to drink water, horses, whatever the case may be, any cattle of any sort, even like bison, they go toward the water. That's where plants are going to grow. Unfortunately, they eat the grass, and that can lead to desertification, and they're also pooping at the same time, so of course that can wash off into the water. So it's another kind of negative about growing food, or getting a lot of meat. Other animals do suffer from the destruction of those water areas. So if we have a bunch of cows that go into that area on the right, what happens is then other animals get affected because they don't have nutrients in the grass or healthy water. We should shift to less grain-dependent animals, things like poultry and farm fish. Here we are, fish. Aquaculture. Aquaculture is basically fish farming. You can see the picture on the right where they're in a lake and they've got a big net and they're raising fish in there. So it's kind of in their natural habitat, but they're not really free. So this is the world's fastest growing type of food production. And obviously we need fish in our diet. We need things like omegas. 55% of the world's fish currently comes from the oceans. The rest is from inland lakes and fish farms. So currently, and there's negative effects, of course, of getting the weight, particularly they're caught in the oceans, but we're doing a lot of fish farming. It's dominated by operations that raise what's called herbivorous, so plant eaters. A couple types of fishing, good and bad. Trawler fishing, you can see in the upper left picture, we drag a funnel-shaped weighted net along the bottom of the ocean. The problem, you catch a lot of fish, and you can see how they pulled it up on there. The problem with that is you catches a lot of sea life, a lot of bycatch, which is unintended catch, and it can destroy coral and destroy plant material that's down there too, so destroying habitat. The one on the bottom left is something called purse seine fishing. So if you can imagine a purse and you take the string and pull it up, what happens is they put these huge nets out, and what happens is fish basically swim into those nets, and then what happens is they can actually scoop up not only the fish that swam into it, but entire schools of fish that they've located with sonar where they like to be. And then what happens is not only do they catch the ideal or the fish they want, but they're also catching bycatch. Long lining is terrible and banned in the United States, unfortunately not in a lot of nations. What they do with long lining, you can see the picture on the right. They put out lines of basically fishing lines, ropes with hooks on it, and they bait those hooks. It can be up to 80 miles long with thousands of hooks on it. And what happens they're seeing is things like sea turtles will come along and eat the food that's hanging on the hook, and then they get the hook in their mouth and then drowned. So lots of bycatch, again, banned by many nations. Drift net fishing is when they put a huge net out. This is the one predominantly where the fish just come swim into it. Again, devastating our oceans because a lot of bycatch, a lot of things like sharks getting into there, sea turtles getting wrapped up into there. There's law that it can be no longer than 1.6 miles in international water. That's still really long. Catches a lot of the wrong fish. So commercial fish have already been overfished. Unfortunately, what's happening is we've gotten the good tasting fish already, like sea bass, and that's going to be gone pretty soon because we like it. There's too little fish left to breed behind, so if we catch all those fish, it's going to become extinct in no time. Commercial extinction is a definition you need to know. Commercial extinction is when it's not profitable anymore. So at one time in the Great Lakes, we had a huge perch population, and then it was overfished because we like our Friday fish fries in Wisconsin. Well, what happened is now it is deemed, pretty much deemed commercially extinct because the amount of resources, energy that it takes to go out and catch those, like gas, it's not really worth it. There's not many out there. We need it to bounce back. To protect fish quotas, we need to restrict the use of certain fish gear, like the long lining, and seasons are needed. So they should only allow fishing during certain times of the year. Let them reproduce. Subsidies are a major reason for overfishing. What happens is a lot of nations will actually pay their people to catch more fish, sell and make more money. Aquaculture then, of course, is a process of raising fish and shellfish for food-like crops. They do it in fished-in areas. You can see an example of it. We need sustainable agriculture in general. This is the end of 14. The problem is, so thinking not about just fish, but about all agriculture, we need to slow our population growth. End of story, because you can see the ramifications as food need goes up. Of course, we've got more pesticides and more herbicides and things of that nature put down, and then that gets into our groundwater. We need to develop and phase in a low input agriculture like organic. The problem is with organic is it's hard to grow a lot of food for a lot of people. We need to increase research, set up demonstrations for farmers so they know what to do. Pretty good at that in the United States. Provide subsidies and foreign aid to increase its use and establish training programs. All right, that's it for 14.